Thank you, Alan. Good afternoon, everybody. I know it's a tough slot at the moment after lunch, so hopefully everybody stays with me here. After me, Sandy will join me and we'll have a bit of a chat. But just like this title for this session talks about, the question is, what is hype versus reality? There's a lot of talk. I mean, we spend the morning hearing some success stories from people who already implemented. A lot of you in the audience are already either deploying AI at scale or are on a journey or evaluating the opportunity. The question is, as you look around, what can we learn from those who's done it well versus what are some of the pitfalls to avoid? So this is a whole new world out there. By the way, if anybody's getting a bit of a headache looking at this slide, this is actually an actual blueprint from one of our clients. This is a story how within a few months, QuantumBlack, the AI arm of McKinsey, which I'm part of, basically reimagined a whole IT organization for a bank. And the idea was, how can we take a small number of engineers, data scientists, and literally build a new IT organization? It was actually really interesting. It's almost leapfrogging from generation 1 straight to the 3.0 version, just skipping what's in the middle. But what does this mean, all these squads and different agents talking to each other? If we take a step back, the interesting story is we have been running what we call the state of AI. It's a survey that we've been doing for multiple years. Before Gen AI was the coolest kid on the block, asking different executives, not just CIOs or CTOs, but business executives, CEOs, and N-1s, how do they view the adoption of technology? What you're seeing here is actually fascinating, that despite all the buzz, despite the agentic talk over dinner parties and every newspaper you open over the weekend, very few people are actually adopting it and scaling it to the full capacity. So the question is, as you think about that, what differentiates those folks who are actually able to take it to the next level, who are actually being able to see the impact coming out of that? And then comes actually the scarier part. I do this a lot, and every time you go to meet a board or an executive team, there's always the same question. Who actually sees value? The CFO would say, hey, I'm investing X or Y, but I don't see anything actually trickling down to the bottom line. It's even actually worse when you're looking how many people are actually not seeing any impact or don't even know how to measure it. And how many people can actually show real value, and that's the 7% over there. One of my clients in the software business, actually, they've got about 4,000 or 5,000 feet on the street selling. They were very proud, actually. They were one of the first ones, almost 3 years ago, when at the time ChatGPT just came out. They were one of the first adopters. They were equipping their salespeople with the ability to prep to meetings, the ability to identify what's the right milk run, who to reach out to. Do I call? Do I text? Do I do a meeting? How to do this properly, what to offer them, next product to buy. They were very advanced. They're very proud of what they achieved, but even today they're saying it's very hard for me to actually prove what drove what and what was the actual root cause of it. So if we take a step back, and McKinsey always like frameworks, but this is actually an interesting one. This is what we called Rewired. I was part of a book that actually came out 2 years ago. The new version is about to come out. This time it's rewired with Gen AI, with agentic in mind. And this is probably true for every technology disruption. And this is based on studying hundreds of cases over the last decade of people who adopted first analytics, then AI, and how do you think about absorbing technology disruption in organizations? On a high level, you would look at it and say, well, this is kind of basic. It's exactly what I expected. But if you start drilling down and really asking yourselves, how is my organization performing against each one of them? Interesting discussions start to emerge. So why don't we start with the strategic roadmap? It's a fancy name. But the question, the headline is basically, just because you can doesn't mean you should do it. And that is the challenge with AI. Distraction. is actually the biggest force. Technology keeps advancing. You can do more and more things, different toys. Many of us are getting the email from the board, from the executive team. Hey, read this over the weekend. Can we do that? Can we try that? The question is, where do you really think value exists? And what kind of business problems you're actually trying to solve? Technology comes after. Talent is a fascinating one. We're actually spending time, some of the leading organizations are thinking about what's called hybrid workforces. How do you think about a team that's actually comprised partially, but I learned this earlier this week, cold-blooded employees, those are the agents, by the way, and warm-blooded employees. My son loves snakes, so I'm like, wow, this is cool. How do you think about those hybrid workforces? How do you think about preparing people and upskilling them? Because the issue is we all love to talk about human in the loop. It became such a phrase. The problem is us, because when we see something that 9.5 out of 10 times is always correct, and we're supposed to identify that one use case or half a case that doesn't work, the chances we'll spot it is very, very low. And then comes the question, where do you even bring the talent from? Again, I'm sure the talk in the halls or over lunch is also about nobody has enough data scientists. Nobody has enough support. How do you even find those people? How do you compete with some of the crazy compensation packages that are being thrown out there? And the answer is, by the way, to skip to the end on talent, is there's a lot of upskilling. And we spend a lot of time as McKinsey thinking about, first we called it AI literacy. Recently, I got some feedback, so we now call it AI fluency. In order, how do you actually upskill the organization, including the business side, the front line, the top team, and everything in between. Operating model, again, I always find it fascinating. One of my favorite pastime activities is to ask who leads the AI in each organization, ask how much budget is allocated, and then look into the different decisions. It's actually fascinating to see. Depending if it's the chief product officer, the CFO, the chief strategy officer, the CTO, or the CIO, you get totally different decisions and totally different fund allocations, which actually drive the results. Ask yourself how your organization is running. Technology, no need to talk about that. We talked a lot about it this morning. Obviously, there's a whole question about your stack. You're building something for the future, and how do you even keep track of the different innovation that keeps coming out? And then data. Again, spent a lot of time about data this morning, Nikhil's presentation on the product roadmap, but I do think it's important to remember many of the organizations that we encounter, data, nobody really wants to deal with that. Legacy systems, how do you think about connecting the different systems? It's the can that everybody used to kick down the road, hoping the next CIO will deal with, and now you've got to take it on. It's garbage in, garbage out. The bottom one is fascinating. How do you think about adoption and scaling? And it even starts with very basic questions about how do you even measure? So let's go back about a year and a half ago. Without naming, I mean, I don't know if you remember at the time GitHub was out, people were talking about, hey, 20% software productivity uplift, 30, 40, people were very excited. Then we had a couple of innovations. I can tell you I've got a client that literally just measured, they achieved 97% software productivity uplift on their developers. Some people can increase velocity. Some people can think about resizing the organization. But there's many other questions. How do you actually measure that? What is the right number? Is 97% phenomenal? Or is it actually should be 130 and they're behind? There's a question about the squads, the actual software development squad. We're changing the organization. Our philosophy is that the new squads in the new world should be actually much smaller. Instead of about 10, 8, we're talking about 4 or 5 people. And then you've got a few agents running it. But in each squad, you need a product manager. Where do you find all these people? And how do you skill them to actually work in an agentic world? We're actually working with one of these software developers that are with software development company that's actually thinking about product management tools. And how do you inject agentic and a whole new methodology to working with that? And I think the question is, we always get the question, what's most important? The answer is, it's almost like a jazz band. How do you make all these components work together in synchronization to achieve the change? But let's go back to that survey and really understand, so those who actually get it right and manage to put all these components in one go, what did they do differently? So lesson number 1 is what we would call reimagine, redesign a workflow from scratch. So many times we see the use cases, which, by the way, I think we're going to start retiring that framing, that description, just like POC, the proof of concept, which I always laugh, what is there still to prove, is being retired. The real high performers, the ones who achieve meaningful uplift in EBIT at the end of the day, are the people who are reimagining the whole workflow. They take a domain, just for example, let's say customer service, and the idea is, let's not just add a call summarization, let's not add a better prioritization, let's not add an automatic entry to the CRM system. Let's reimagine customer service altogether. Maybe our customers actually are not interested in calling in to begin with. Maybe the solution is a whole agentic interface to allow self-serve and reimagine that domain. The second thing, which I think is actually quite interesting, is where do you focus? There's so much you can do, but at the end of the day, there's only so many hours a day, there's only so much talent, and by the way, there's also very little management focus, because one thing we don't have up here, one of the lessons 0 is actually full onboarding of the executive team, that they're all in on this game, and it's fascinating to see what happens when they're not, the chances of success. But back to this one, you can see there are 3 main buckets that we kind of think about the opportunities. There's a lot of talk about the left-hand side, the efficiency or productivity. How do we actually do things better? How do we actually find, whether it's, I mentioned software development, I mentioned customer service, but there's many others. It could be marketing, it could be other things. How do we actually do this in a more effective and efficient way? So it's true, we're all focused there because that presumably has a bottom line impact. But if you look at the middle, we are actually seeing the best ones out there actually deploy it in, how do I think about the next product? How do I think about finding new customers or approaching new segments? How do I deploy new value propositions? Classic commercial excellence applications, which are actually making a dent. And the last one, I think, is really the truly differentiator. It's what we call innovation. Meaning, what does that stand for? Obviously, you can think of new product, but sometimes it's about new business models. Literally reimagining, hey, what would a red team that will disrupt myself look like? I can give you an example. I've got a client that is in an industry which is probably pretty traditional compared to most of you. They're in the wood panel industry. And I always say, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere with AI, so just like New York. What they basically figured out, they're selling resins to wood mills. They figured out that with AI, all these manufacturing processes will improve. And that optimizations will reduce the number of resins and increase the quality. So instead of waiting for that to happen, they decided to disrupt themselves. They actually bought a small AI company, and now they're building a software arm that comes together with a resin to pretty much reduce the resins. Let me help you buy from me less, but in the process, I will control the entire process optimization of your clients, which is actually a very innovative way to think about it. I'm working with a law firm that's reimagining law and the products and the end game for lawyers. The billable hours, we can debate how long it will survive. So how do you think about new business models in those spaces? And then the last lesson, I mentioned a little bit about the people. We're going to have literally teams that are combined. Actually, we already have. We're just not acknowledging it, meaning teams that are half human, half agents. There's always the question, do you think an agent can actually manage a half-human team, a hybrid team with humans? I mean, we're all a little bit slaves of technology. Just ask yourself how many times you looked at your phone since the morning. So it's actually not as out there as one might think. But we are seeing already, how do you think about different functions? How do you actually manage it? What's good enough for an agent? How do you give an evaluation to an agent? How do you keep an eye that they don't go rogue? And as we talked about in the morning, the governance and orchestration becomes really interesting. And then other questions is, how do you actually train the next generation? This is something that we as McKinsey spend a lot of time on, especially in professional services. Listen, burning the midnight oil through my career, was it that ROI was that high? Probably not. But it actually taught you a thing or two. How do you actually teach the next generation if some of the more mundane jobs, the mundane tasks done by juniors are actually now being done by agents? But with that, why don't we pause here? And that's kind of just a snippet. The book is actually coming out, I think, in 2 months now. It's going to have a lot of other learnings from the Gen AI based on what we've seen from other companies. But let me pass it to my friend Sandy from Microsoft, who's going to come and share some perspectives too.
So really looking forward to your book, Ben. So I'll be the first buyer, let me know. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here in Miami. Thanks to C3 and team to organize this here. Yesterday, I got on the plane in Seattle. I was quite happy to get out of the gray weather and get into Miami. And I always do. And my work in Microsoft to work with startups and large software companies is going to all different parts of the world all the time. And every time I go somewhere, I look at and say, hey, what's going on in that city? So I was just looking at my co-pilot, looking at Miami, and it was quite interesting. So much great development is happening here in the city, so much economic development. There's commercial boom. And one thing that was very interesting is it's become a regional hub for AI. So very impressive. I'm so glad to hear that the local economy is doing well and is transforming itself as a regional AI hub and attracting a lot of talent in the AI industry. I want to talk a little bit about the macro situation in the next 10, 15 minutes that's happening with AI. And no surprise, the AI is one of the largest, biggest shift we have seen in many generations. And some of the people equate to the steam engine invention and the electric bulb invention, and we're not too far off. If you look at just the IDC predictions for next 18 months, we're going to have 1.2 billion agents in public, essentially deployed, which is crazy. I think we're going to beat that in 6 months, is my prediction. So it's actually going faster than we think. Now, with all that hype that has gone with AI, there is now real implementations that are happening. You heard from GSK this morning on what they're implementing with. The ROIs are coming out. People are getting a gist of what it is and what it is not. And out of that, there is a success framework that has emerged on where AI is making a difference. And what are these frontier companies doing? These companies who are adopting AI, who are really extending the edge of frontier, and also the people in these organizations who are becoming like frontier employees doing differently from the rest of the pack. So that's why I want to spend a few minutes on that success framework. First of all, I would just say that the frontier companies are looking at AI not just as a technical transformation, technology transformation. They're looking at transforming their entire business and their entire organization. It's not about just going after the next features and the next LLM, but really looking at the broader impact they can make with their businesses in the market. There are 4 areas that AI is really making an impact, and it's kind of a checklist. So if you're in your organization, you're starting an AI project and an AI investment, it's a good checklist to say, does it really fit into one of these 4 boxes? The first one is really about your employee experience, your employee productivity. This is the first place where we have seen a lot of adoption of AI. There is an AI assistant available, call it Copilot, in pretty much every industry for every role in every part of the world. And those AI assistants have been amazingly helpful for people to do their business and be able to really offload some of the mundane tasks to the Copilot. The Copilot is, think of it as you know, most of you use it, is kind of your browser to the rest of agentic web. So there's a lot of agents which are sort of autonomous digital assistants, and the Copilot can call these agents to get the task, complete the task. But the Copilot really understands your context as a human. It actually understands your context in the role that you are playing in that company. If you just look at an example like developer productivity using the coding copilots out there, like GitHub Copilot, just from Microsoft perspective, in the last 12 months, AI wrote 30% of the code that we published, that we deployed. That ratio is going to go even higher in the times to come. And so there is a certain level of productivity that you're gaining. That doesn't mean that you have the senior developers have more time to get more coffee and stuff, but they're applying the time to other productive things. And so that's an area where we are seeing a lot of deployment and success. It's also the Copilot assistant for salespeople. We have seen in Microsoft, all our 60,000 sellers are now on Copilot every day. And you can see the cohort of the sellers who are really consuming the Copilot, who are on it every day, have better close ratios, have better pipeline. You can see them very distinctly how they're performing different from the rest. The second area where it is very prevalent is customer engagement. For the longest time, there was a big pain point where you don't personalize the customer engagement. It's been a painful process for whenever you call in, whether it's B2B or B2C. AI gives an opportunity to really provide the personal engagement with customer at scale. And it is a combination of humans and agents, and where do you start the process, where do you upgrade the process. Sometimes it starts with agent and you go to a human because it's something totally new and the human needs to take over, or the agent is actually better because it can process so much data so quickly in real time and provide that personalized service at scale. The third area where we're seeing a lot of potential, and some of the work is happening now, is kind of really looking at reshaping the business process. And there's a confusion about automating the business process versus looking at reshaping the business process. For example, like, it's not about that you had 32 steps for a process and you automate it so that you can do it faster. It's really bringing down those 32 steps to maybe 2 steps. As an example, we have in Microsoft a whole process for asking for investments on customer deals. And typically, it used to take about 42 days on average to get that done, which was quite long. And sometimes you lost the deal because we just never were able to come back with the approval or even decline it. We built a digital twin with one of our software partners to really look at the entire process, simulate the entire process, and look at, like, why are so many people even approving it? Do they really need to approve it? And what's the institutional knowledge of why do they decline it when they decline it? It's come down now to 6 days, and we plan to bring it to like 2 days in the next few weeks. So that's an example of how to think about reshaping the business process, the core business processes in the enterprise, and how you can think of the workflows which will change because now you're applying human and agents together. Finally, there is obviously massive opportunity for disruption with AI in bending the curve. Like, for example, you heard again in the GSK case about drug discovery is a 10-year process, billions of dollars, and can that process now come down to 10 months? Can we start now using Gen AI to generate molecules? And which is kind of what's happening now around the world in the large pharmaceutical companies. That is a great example of where you bend the curve in a very non-linear fashion. Or when you're looking at manufacturing from end to end, you can actually simulate your entire manufacturing, design to manufacturing to supply chain, and then really look at if-then analysis at any given time to see how do you take cost issues or supply chain issues or if-then issues on design, on quality, et cetera, before you even start the production. With that, the approach that is super critical, one is it has to be the AI in the flow of work. It has to be connected with a human ambition. This is not about AI just doing for the sake of doing things, because this human and AI interaction is super critical. And most organizations I meet with are starting to think about humans leading and AI doing the operations. I know it's kind of far from reality right now, but that's kind of where things are heading. The second thing is it has to be ubiquitous innovation. It's not about one champion group in the organization which knows AI and then rest of them just follow them. This is not a successful model today with AI. It may have worked for other things. It is not working today. So it has to be ubiquitous, and it has to be across the entire system of the business, not just one place or the other. And the third thing is, with all these millions of AI agents running in your organization, do you even know what they're doing? And how are they making decisions? What is the business process? Observability? When do they say no? Are they following your policies? Are they following the ethics? Are they following the culture of your company? Are they following your business goals? And that's the observability of what is happening in the agents is super critical as we move forward into the maturity phase. Now, if you combine all of this, what really becomes is it's the intelligence that you are bringing in a democratized way for your organization. Now, it's not about you have a better LLM tomorrow and that's your intelligence, because right now in our catalog we have 11,000 LLMs, right? And those LLMs don't know your organization, they don't know how you work, they don't know your enterprise data, they don't understand how you engage with your customers. They're not personalized for your organization. So you really need to teach this AI your intelligence of your organization so that they can be helpful. And this is becoming more and more important as we now have, as Ben just talked about, there is humans and agents in the same team. If you employ a new human, you onboard them, and you go through a cycle of onboarding for a few years, few months, in different types, you have to go through the same with the agents. The agent has to really understand institutional knowledge. So how do you prepare these agents to be productive, to be able to do things that humans would otherwise do in your organization? That's how you need to build the systems, and I'll talk a little bit about that, you need to build the systems in which the agents can actually understand your institutional IQ and be able to operate like any other employee in your company. And finally, all of this intelligence is only useful as much as you can trust it. If you cannot trust it, it's a big problem, because you're in a regulated environment, you're a public company, and you're making decisions, and you have to be responsible for your decisions. So the trust of making sure that every step you can actually observe what AI is doing in your organization, how it's making decisions, what decisions it's kind of, are they aligned with your philosophy of your company, et cetera, is super critical. To really bring this together, this is what we call it Microsoft IQ, which is really built of 5 blocks of distinct things. One is work IQ. Work IQ is the idea that how does an organization work? Who are the different types of roles in the organization? If you are running a co-pilot, does the co-pilot understand how you work? What's your style of your engaging with other people? A lot of that institutional knowledge is sitting in emails, in chats, in documents, in SharePoints, in CRM. So it really gives the IQ of how things work in an organization. And that's why when you see the latest sort of innovations coming up, those co-pilots are able to really write emails in the tone that makes sense, which is aligned to your tone, because it knows how the people work. So work IQ is this system which gives you the IQ about how an organization works. And this is personalized to your organization. It's not some other organization. It's based on your data, your roles in the company, and so everybody can tap into it. You can write an agent that can tap into this work IQ and be able to do different things for you. The second one is Foundry IQ, which is a developer platform. And the idea of this IQ platform is, there's like this massive growth of LLMs that are coming out. Which LLMs do you even use for which application? So it actually gives you all that intelligence of It actually gives you a recommender list and say, hey, here are the 2 LLMs that are best for healthcare, for the solution that you are planning to write. The second thing it does is it does give you a sequence of all the different knowledge systems that you should prioritize. So because when you're writing an application, that agent can go to a local, there could be 10 knowledge bases in your enterprise. It could be a web. There may be websites which may have the similar type of knowledge. So how do you prioritize those knowledge? And so this Foundry IQ, the idea is to really provide that intelligence that the agents can actually follow the guidelines of your company. The third thing is Fabric IQ, which is essentially a semantic layer on top of the data, which is if you are in oil and gas industry, how do you understand from the data what it is talking about? So it should be able to understand what does it mean to have drilling a new well or maintenance of a well, et cetera. So all these entities and the semantic understanding of that vertical and the domain is what Fabric IQ is. And it works virtually on the data. The data could be in multiple clouds. It could be in on-prem and in cloud. So it could be wherever it is. And the last thing you want to do is start moving data into one place. That data movement projects don't last. And when you do those data movement projects, they take 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. By that time, the window of opportunity is gone. And so how do you build this semantic layer based on wherever the data sits? And it's super critical. Of course, the data has to make sense, but it is making sure that it can run the semantic layer across your data state. Agent 365 is the control plane for all observability. It's based on open standards. It allows customers to deploy their agents, third-party agents, like if C3 is has an agent, it can deploy C3 agent, but also it can deploy Microsoft agents. So it's an open architecture where you actually have then a complete control plane of all agents and MCP servers running in your organization and be able to meter them, tune them, make sure that you can observe how the business processes are kind of making those decisions, which IT systems it's going, what are the identity, permissions, all that stuff. That is super critical. You see a lot of time agents, people write agents very fast, but they're either under permission or over permission. And so a lot of this is taken care of by A365. And finally, with our partners, we are helping customers build their first agents and then deploy them into the next wave of a set of agents that they can build themselves. And we want to make sure every customer can build an agentic factory, and they can put the guardrails and all the different blocks in place, including they make sure that everything is responsible AI with observability layers and stuff, and put that in place and build this agentic factory for their organization. Now, C3 plays a role in every of this block. C3 is our partner for the domain expertise when it comes to industrial, when it comes to oil and gas, when it comes to airlines, when it comes to manufacturing, when it comes to healthcare. C3 provides verticalization of Work IQ for Foundry IQ. They have models which are built just for healthcare, for example. For Fabric IQ, they bring the semantics and ontologies of certain domains and verticals that sit on top of as Fabric IQ on top of our data lakes. And then they build the agents which are part of Agent 365. I won't go in details here, but we have a lot of great wins. You heard this morning from the GSK leader, and we were able to improve their forecast by 23% for their demand forecast, which is a big ticket item for their organization in terms of cost control and revenue opportunity. I'll pause there to continue the conversation. Maybe I'll invite Ben and Meryl on the stage and have a chat on this topic. How are you doing?
Do you want me this side? Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, Ben. I was quite surprised, Ben, by the statistic of only 7% of your surveyed clients actually see significant value of the so-called cold-blooded workforce. Where do these AI adoptions and AI transformations usually really stall? Like, where does it go wrong?
Yeah, I mean, not surprisingly, I think two places. One, if we think about that framework that I showed before, it's a little bit almost like being well, we shouldn't use combat analogies these days, but almost like being an F-16 pilot, just going back to the morning session. How do you think about all those components actually working together, the talent, the governance, operating model, the data, the technology, the strategy around it, and then the road, and then actually adoption and scaling. But I think the weak link, not surprisingly, is us, the people. The good news is I think usually people are very eager to adopt. They're actually excited. They all use it anyway at home or in their private lives. If your organization doesn't offer it, they kind of do it on the side, not exactly by policy. So it's better to bring it out there. But I do think figuring out how people will do their job in a different way, not just incremental way, I think is the issue.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. Sandy, you are involved in a lot of these operations that truly are scaling at very, very, very large volumes. Can you share a little bit more about sort of the organizational changes and the operational changes that you see happening there?
Yeah, I think, look, I think there's many things Ben just alluded to, but some of the successful implementations we have seen starts with like a leadership mindset, which is not about, this is not about technology adoption, it's about business transformation. And how do you build a business architecture which is system-wide and be very clear on the KPIs, what are the goals of those AI initiatives? And I think once you start there, then a lot of focus is on the skilling of your organization. And I say everybody's struggling with that, but the ones that are very intentional about it, for my own organization, every other week, we do a Friday skilling session where we just bring my entire organization and somebody has an idea and we just do a hackathon. And people teach each other. And I think there is no silver bullet to skilling. Like, you have to just dive into it. You have to do it, and you have to immerse yourself. You don't have to be a coding person for that. Today, the tools are available that you can do AI development without any coding experience at all, without any developer experience at all. So I think the organizations which are really immersing themselves, but really focusing on the business outcomes, I think those, and really kind of looking at the end-to-end architecture of AI, I think are the ones that we've seen success.
So you mentioned 1.2 billion agents live. I mean, that's a number that is sort of hard to fathom, but just thinking about what we do at C3 and how many we have live, that sort of brings it in perspective. And then Ben, you alluded to the McKinsey research that shows if you truly embed these AIs into existing workflows, you're a lot more likely to be successful. Could you give a couple of those examples?
Yeah, so I think this is one of the first times when I travel a lot, way too much, so I always miss my kids. So I usually mention them. I think I mentioned one of them already, so I'll mention the second one. Over dinner, we were comparing notes, and I actually realized I've got a good example is what my 12-year-old have done. So I didn't even know about it. Last year, apparently, he decided, based on his own research, which is actually interesting, he understood he has a need. He's preparing for exams. So with the help of his my nephew, he basically built, first with Cursor, then B44, he basically built to himself an AI tutor. So what he does, he uploads his schoolwork before exams. Basically, the tutor tests him, which is great for me. I don't have to do it anymore. And basically, it adapts what he knows and doesn't know and focuses on the weaker areas. When the exam comes back, and it basically learns how did he do, and then it improves over time. And I think it's fascinating because if a 12-year-old figured out he has a need, he doesn't know how to code at all, but he understood the logic, wrote the process, optimized it, played with a tool, didn't like it, moved to a different tool, and now it's optimizes. It basically says that there's no process out there that cannot be applied. And I think that is an AI native thinking, not how can I do a little task, what is the task to be done, and how do I reinvent it beginning to end?
It's very impressive for a 12-year-old. Sandy,
it's the 3-point version.
Yeah, you need to learn.
I don't know, that's from my wife, but
Sandy, do you have some examples?
Yeah, I mean, I think like one of the example I always love is I have a software partner which is building skilling in the flow of work. And they were a skilling partner, very traditional skilling partner. They would do certification for surgeons, for technical people, pretty much every blue collar, white collar job. With this agentic stuff, they have built this in the flow of work agent, which right now they just published something which is for English pronunciation. I can use it. And essentially the way it works is it sits on Teams and it watches your interactions. It watches how you're writing things, and then right in the moment, it'll give you a nudge and say, hey, this is something that you could have done better. And it says, here's a 30-second video that I've just created for you to go and check out on how you can use, you could have stated it in a different way. And that's like, if you just think of this as a person on a factory floor, a physician, just pretty much pick up your industry, a warehouse manager, if that AI can come in your workflow and be able to support you to accelerate and get better at what you do and be productive, I mean, that's the holy grail, which I think we can reach.
That sounds interesting. Final question, time flies here. I know you're both in a lot of meeting rooms with executive teams. If you have one piece of advice for members in the audience or others who are watching this later for 2026, what would it be? Sandy, start with you.
Look, I think, first of all, you have to lead your organization, and they have to be seeing you actually walking the talk. And that means, like, you're actually rethinking how you do things today. And your workflow has to change. It's not about just knowing AI. It's like what you do from morning till evening. Think about, reflect on all the things that you do, and how would you change that? What would be the AI can impact your workflow? I would also have empathy on AI learning. I think there is this thing of like a lot of pressure on the employees today on you have to be AI knowledgeable, and it's hard. It's hard for people to adapt because it really is a different sort of domain paradigm altogether. So I think have the patience to develop the people. There's not enough people to recruit who know AI. You have to develop the people you have and lead by advantage. Second is, the data preparation for AI is super critical. And that doesn't mean big data projects in moving from one cloud to the other, on-prem to cloud, but it is more about just making sure the data that is your agents are reaching out to are useful data. And they're not, because otherwise it's garbage in, garbage out. And those agents, think of them as your employees. And more they're productive. And unlike humans, which can talk and learn, they have to go in the data to really learn about what's going on in the company. So I think that data projects are important. And the last thing I would say is, one of the success story I have seen with C3 is the forward deployed engineers. We have now, Microsoft has the forward deployed engineer. And what that does is working with our clients to build the first production application with real business impact. And that's a new way of working. Used to be like, hey, either give me the entire software stack, and that's pretty much it. I'll take it from here, or build an entire custom stack for me, or my entire IT organization will build that. I think those days are gone, and you need software partners who already have 80% of what you need, but you also need to show them how to customize it to your need, how to work with your data, how to work with the rest of your brownfield stacks. And so I think this is an area where I would say you should really leverage what the C3 and Microsoft partnership, what we're working together.
I would say, again, AI fluency. It has two sides of the coin. First of all, it's true for all of you. You should all budget, I would say, an hour a week. It could be on a plane. It could be in the gym while you're listening to a podcast that AI made for you, just to track technology and play with the different agents. It's just amazing. Every week, every other week, there's new innovation, and I think it's important to practice what you preach. And then from a company enterprise level, my favorite example actually was a CEO that took the entire top 35 people in the company. It's a 60,000 employee industrial player. He took them out a week and a half before Christmas. This is the end of the year, it's December, super critical time. That's a show that this is important. We spent 3.5 days with them in MIT where you do 3 things. 1, understand the possibility, the art of the possible, like we've done this morning. 2nd, you actually practice, build agents, and really understand what it means. It's not that easy, to Sandy's point. It's good to know before you ask your team to do it. And then lastly, plan. How do you reimagine your own domain or your own company? So again, I think it's about teaching yourself. It starts there, and then your teams and your colleagues.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Sandy. I can't resist but have to put in a little plug. If you want to build your first agent yourself, go to one of the hands-on labs this afternoon. You actually can put your hands on the keyboard and do that. So thank you, wonderful, and looking forward to the rest.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.